I don't run this YouTube channel because I've had lifelong aspirations of becoming a content creator, whatever that is. I run this channel because it generates a lot of leads for our paying subscription product, Nanalyze Premium. And those people who pay our bills, that's who we work for. And one of the services that we offer them is this Rate My Portfolio series. So people who are paying subscribers send us a list of their assets, and we keep things anonymous and stick with weightings because the amount of money that everybody's saved or makes is relative, of course. Since half our audience is international, we'll avoid discussions of tax law, and we try to guide, not dictate, just using basic principles of investing that few people would argue with. And of course, the usual caveat, this isn't financial advice at all. So let's meet today's premium subscriber. His name's Vayu. He's 32 years old. He's a Thai citizen living in Thailand, and I have to say he's saved an impressive amount of money for his age, and that's because he lives below his means, saving anywhere from 50 to 60% of his income. And when you work in finance, as he does, he's a finance graduate, former investment banker, it's very difficult to do that because everybody around you is spending like a drunken sailor. So possibly his culture or upbringing helped him realize that the more you save and the harder you work, the luckier you get. He seems to be an extremely analytical person, and he also has a home mortgage that we're going to exclude from today's analysis. So let's dig right into his AUM breakdown. First thing you're going to notice here is that nearly half of all his assets, his investments, are in Thai stocks. Now, this is tricky because he's probably worked in the industry in Thailand, so he has a very good understanding of that market. So he has an advantage, but at the same time, he's exhibiting a lot of domestic bias here. We're going to talk about that. Another third of his assets under management fall under various funds. We're going to take a look at some of those. Then he has long-term savings insurance and some other bits, U.S. stocks at 6% and about 2% crypto. So let's talk about his overweight on Thailand. So when we look at the world and we want to figure out what exposure we ought to have to different countries, we can use MSCI's ACWI index. That stands for All Country World Index, and it covers 47 markets. 23 of those are developed, 24 are emerging. It covers 99% of the investable global equities market. So then you can say, all right, if I replicated that, how much exposure ought I have to Thailand? 0.27%. You can see that here. So 59% would be the United States, then 3.9% for the UK. So Thailand's a very small percentage of that. It's interesting to note they are actually more heavily weighted than Indonesia, which is a huge country. So Thailand is certainly a up-and-coming place. They seem to be doing quite well as a country. So his choice to overweight Thailand is certainly a bold one, and given his age, he can afford to take more risks. Now, I was introduced to a new concept when reviewing his assets, and that's this idea of a feeder fund. I've put a description of that here, and I think the basic way to describe this is that it's a mechanism for individuals to invest in foreign funds at a significant price. So as he's said here, these fund of funds or feeder funds, you can expect around 1 to 1.5% of the net asset value for the management fee on top of the fee collected by the fund. So it's a necessary evil for him to invest, unfortunately. And when we look at the funds that he's invested in, there's a lot going on here. There's a lot of names. So what we did is we went through and looked at the funds that he had the most money invested in. So about half of his fund exposure, or 17% of his total assets under management, are in these 5 funds. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the Baillie Gifford funds that he's holding. And these aren't the only 2. They just happen to be the ones that he's most heavily weighted in. They're actually, and we've written about this topic in the past relating to some of Baillie Gifford's funds, exceptionally well managed from our perspective in the research that we've done. So this particular fund here, this is the Baillie Gifford Long-Term Global Growth Fund. And you can see that it's quite interesting. This table on top shows over the past 5 years the top 5 contributors to the total return and the bottom 5 contributors. That's pretty slick. You don't see asset managers doing that very often. The collateral that they put out for these funds is exceptional. It's like reading Buffett's letter almost. These guys do a great job. So they're benchmarked to MSCI ACWI. Again, we discussed what that is. So they're benchmarked against global stocks. They're outperforming over whatever time frames that I looked at in this collateral. They say here, we focus on what the world could look like a decade from now. So love that long-term perspective. You're paying 0.73% fees, so that's higher than your average ETF, but it seems like you get value for that. Here you can see the number of holdings quite concentrated at 37. That happens to be the number of holdings in our own tech portfolio. And they also surprisingly have a similar rule that we do. They say risk guideline for a 10% maximum weight in any one stock. That's interesting because we're actually thinking of laxing that a bit to let the winners ride a little bit more, but that's a different conversation. So what they do here is they take small bets on compelling companies and let them ride. In looking at their 37 names, there's certainly some interesting and new names that we haven't seen in that bigger list. But another notable aspect of this fund is there's no hesitation on China tech names despite the VI structure risks. So those are risks that we're not willing to take. Now, if you recall, he had 2 of his top 5 funds were in Baillie Gifford funds, and these are the 2 funds. One is the Worldwide Long-Term Global Growth Fund, and the other one is Baillie Gifford Long-Term Global Growth Fund. Essentially, they're the same thing, though they're different funds. So the one here on the left, you could see, has 5 times the AUM of the other. And the weightings, these are roughly the same names in this list with slightly different weightings. So it's kind of a theme looking at all the funds that he's holding. I would say maybe try to minimize that list, and maybe there's a reason that Vayu has to have all these different funds, and I don't know if there's a compelling reason for that, but try to make your life simple, and if you have 2 funds that are the same, just put money in one and leave it at that. So the other 3 big funds that he's holding, this T. Rowe Global Technology Equity Fund, took a quick look at that. Don't like their fees. You have this close to 1% charge along with a transaction fee of 0.5%. This is just ridiculous, right? You shouldn't be having to pay, especially when you consider the 1 to 1.5% on NAV for the fund of funds shell that you're having to utilize. This is just too much. And the other reason why he probably shouldn't even hold that fund is because he's already managing his own tech portfolio, and we want to take a quick look at that. So you could see here, this is quite a nice portfolio. I love to see someone making their own decisions. So even though Vayu is a paying subscriber here at Nanalyze, even if we're avoiding a company, he still looks at our research and says, you know what, I'm going to hold that anyway. So there's some names here that we wouldn't consider holding that he's holding anyway. He had previous cloud work experience, which he uses for selecting SaaS companies that he thinks will outperform over time. He's holding 21 stocks with a target weighting then would equal 4.7%. You can see he's overweight some names as a result of performance and also overinvesting, and that's certainly fine. You might consider adding a size category here so you can get an idea of the size of these firms. This is roughly 6% of his total assets under management, so a relatively small amount. But what he might consider doing is getting rid of that T. Rowe fund and then just putting the monies into these stocks and not paying somebody else for that since he's already doing the work anyway. Now, the other 2 funds out of the top 5 are China and India. And he had an interesting comment here. He says, I've invested a lot in China funds and lost a lot. Well, I looked at your returns because he records everything. He does a great job of having spreadsheets that describe more data than I would certainly have, and it's very analytical. But I'm not sure if these are funds that he's invested in and sold and has lost money on, or if they're simply the paper losses that he's holding. And those aren't, I wouldn't say, a lot. That's just the nature of these volatile emerging markets. He says, I still believe in long-term growth prospects of China. Yep, me too, but cannot figure out a good strategy to deal with it. I totally agree with what you're saying there. It's very tricky. He says, please suggest if you have any ideas. Currently, I'm trying to invest more in India and non-tech Chinese funds. That's probably because he's already holding a tech China fund. So the answer there is that we'd go always, and I don't know if this is an option for you, but ETFs, and you may not be able to access these because you've invested in nothing but funds, and I'm assuming that's because you can't invest in ETFs, but this is what you'll want to look at. Try to find a fund, or obviously an ETF if you can, that tracks the MSCI India Index, all right? And you can see here we've listed out these various funds that give you exposure to India. And the question here is this fifth fund, the Franklin FTSE India ETF, very cheap, and I wonder why that is. So we've had a lot of people asking about investing in India, so I think this will probably be a follow-up presentation where we dig into this. So I would say, if you're going to look for a compelling way to invest in India, picking stocks is going to be fairly difficult as it is in China. Go find a fund or ETF that you're paying around 65 basis points for, or roughly the average of what an ETF might charge. Don't overpay on fees. And when it comes to China, you can see here the biggest Chinese ETFs, and of course at the top, MSCI China ETF there, at again, 60 basis points or so. That's reasonable, to pay. So find something that charges an equivalent amount of money that gives you a broad exposure to China. But there's also this ETF that we pulled up here that's has rather low assets under management of $500 million, but it says Wisdom Tree China X State-Owned Enterprises Fund. Well, that's rather interesting. Sort of a double-edged sword, because state-owned enterprises in China are going to enjoy an advantage over those that aren't, because the government there is controlling a lot of things. But then you could also say, well, I don't want the inefficiencies of a state-owned enterprise in my portfolio, so I want those excluded. So I think what we'll do in the future then is perhaps take a closer look at these various ETFs and methods of investing in China. We happen to be holding in our own assets under management Chinese funds that are domiciled abroad, and certainly paying a pretty penny for that. But ideally, if you weren't going to take advantage of that, as most investors wouldn't be able to, then you would certainly want to consider ETFs. Now, when we look at how Vayu describes his tolerance for risk, these are the different statements he made. He says, I always try to avoid leverage. Well, that's good. You should never take advantage of leverage. So he understands that that's a dangerous place to go. I'm never afraid of exchange rate risks. Well, to be honest, these seem to offset each other over time, so that's a fair enough statement. He says, I don't concern myself much about geographic risks. Well, we'd certainly can see that. Would caution you a bit there on domestic bias, and of course, the 47% exposure to Thai stocks. It's actually more than that, because he has some Thai funds in his list of funds as well. He says, I try not to lose principal, so I don't hold any stock more than 10% based on cost basis. That's similar, right, to how we approach things. We don't try to catch falling knives. We only put a certain amount of money in. You could see that Baillie Gifford takes that same approach as well. That makes a lot of sense. I can invest in deep tech or cash-burning businesses if I diversify. Yes, you can. Good. He does not engage in derivative assets, but I'm comfortable with crypto. So, we'd point to the trilemma, the massive amounts of continuing fraud, which are just mind-blowing, and say that, yes, there's some there, but it's not there yet. He says he loves IPO stocks because he loves growth stories. That's understandable. That's why we enjoy investing in disruptive technologies. He says also, I'm comfortable investing in emerging markets like Brazil, India, Vietnam, because I live in an emerging market. And that makes sense. It's understandable. We have a lower tolerance for risk. So just some parting thoughts. This gentleman has more than 3 decades of investing left, so a lot of time. He's off to an excellent start. May want to simplify those fund allocations, make your life easier. That excessive Thai exposure is a risk. You can just offset that by investing, as he says he is. He pinged me right before this presentation, mentioned some U.S. dividend stocks that he was looking at. And he can afford to take risks given his young age. So the best wishes for this gentleman. And he says here, I just want to take this opportunity to thank you. This YouTube video he's talking about, our Living Off Dividends video, is a masterpiece and inspirational. It was not a difficult decision to subscribe to your channel. Well, the thanks are all from this side of the table because I really appreciate your financial support, Vayu. It's what lets us do everything that we do. So thank you so much for that. And I wanted to leave you with a video on the dangers of investing in Chinese stocks. I'm sure you're probably well aware of this, and you may have seen this already. Maybe others haven't, but it's certainly worth a look. And make sure you subscribe to this channel as we'll be taking a closer look at how to effectively invest in China and India in the future. Thanks for taking the time to watch this today.